the stock market becomes increasingly volatile. You can no longer say the words China virus, and two masks are better than one. I'll be getting into that and more on The William Hall Show. So GameStop, over the course of the past few days, we've seen their stock completely surge, and it's become this national topic of how exactly did it become that one of the failed game stores of the last few years has become the biggest talk in the stock market. So I'm going to basically go into the details of exactly how that happened, why it happened. But first, to give you a little bit of the story of how this started. So GameStop's value for their stock, or the dollar amount per stock basically, was under $5. They have filed bankruptcy multiple times. They used to be pretty big, but a lot of bad policies, the fact that they never really had games in their stores, a lot of brick and mortar locations when right now people buy games online primarily. All of that basically contributed to GameStop being a failed business. They were effectively going to go out of business anyways. And believe it or not, with the way that the stock market works is that there are certain hedge fund companies that effectively can make money out of the failure of a business, such as GameStop and many others. So they were already going out of business, and effectively what happened is that the stock value soared. It increased 8,000% compared to only a few months ago. And this is a quote from Business Insider saying between January 20th and January 26th, GameStop's stock value leaped just over $35 per share to north of $140 per share. And then by January 27th, it hit new highs of over $325 per share. That is a massive increase. I mean, if you had a few $1,000s invested in GameStop for whatever reason at the time, you made a ton of money off of this. So the shares rose 157% to a session high of $380 per share shortly after 11 a.m. So it was already just insane as far as what you were getting out of this if you were invested in GameStop. So why did this happen? Believe it or not, it actually had nothing to do with GameStop themselves. GameStop didn't make some press release or new announcement of a new venture that they were going on. It actually, they didn't do anything at all. What actually happened is this all was stirred up from a subreddit called Wall Street Bets. And this is on Reddit. This is basically a forum. And it was a collection of members that got together and they basically look at the stock market. They look at what other big investors are doing and basically make determinations off of that. So what effectively caused all of this uproar is that one of the Redditors effectively looked at a hedge fund company, which is effectively just a company that invests money into or buys stock, expecting it to fail, usually. So when they wind up doing this, they were able to make money out of it when they basically sell the stock back to their broker. And that's how they run their entire business. But this Redditor found that this company had basically bought a ton of shares in GameStop against them. Basically, they bought shares when the price was higher and knowing that it was going to be lower so that they could sell them back for a cheaper price. So effectively what happened is Elon Musk even tweeted out this subreddit link, which caused the whole thing to get even more attention, believe it or not. And then effectively, this has turned into a battle between regular people and the suits, the people that are the hedge fund managers, and that's all they do is effectively play the stock market in their favor. So what happened? All of this was done because the Wall Street Bets effectively got all of their users to invest in GameStop out of nowhere. And what that winds up doing is that it raises the stock price of what GameStop is set at. And so those hedge fund managers previously before were betting on GameStop's stock prices going down and then banking on it. It actually went and skyrocketed, which means that all of a sudden the shares that they had were going to cost them a lot more money to basically pay back. So they wound up losing billions of dollars. So much money, in fact, it says the amount of their losses surpassed 13 billion. That's more than what the hedge fund is actually even worth totally, which means they had to file bankruptcy themselves. And then eventually, they had to close their short positions, buy all of the GameStop stock back at much higher prices, sending the price even higher from there. This is oftentimes called a short squeeze, basically when they aren't able to make the money off of the stocks that they had previously borrowed. So now the hedge funds with massive is dealing with a massive short exposure, so they can short squeeze them into bankruptcy as well. That's what the Redditors are now looking at doing. They've already done it with a few of these hedge fund people and places, and they're looking at expanding that now to even more, which is crazy at this point. Like it's actually pretty cool, and I think, and I'll get into a little bit more of the details on that later, but it says that all of Wall Street is saying that the public is joining together in this fashion should be illegal. Wall Street doesn't like this. They don't want all of these people joining together to fight back against the big hedge fund people that are profiting off of the failure and success of different businesses. So they, and of course the Redditors and the people that are investing in this stuff are saying, well, they lost at their own game. I mean, they play this game too. They play these businesses. They set things up because they knew that the GameStop price was going to go down, and they basically bet against them effectively. So how is the media treating this situation? The media is treating this as a bunch of alt-right trolls and pretty much everything else under the book. Of course, that's their kind of go-to now. If anything happens that's against the corporate elites or anything like that, all of a sudden you're now a white supremacist. You are alt-right. You're doing things that, although have nothing to do with race, that's the way they're going to pin this. Keep in mind that Reddit is a very liberal site. They banned the Donald and a bunch of other subreddits that were even remotely pro-Trump. If you go to the subreddit r/politics, it's entirely run by Democrats, left-wing people. There's not one piece of good news for Trump on that entire Reddit page. And yet there's claiming somehow that this is just a bunch of people that are on the right. That doesn't make any sense. The fact is that this is free market activity working against people that are also investing in the free market. I mean, that's really what this is about. They beat them at their own game. And the hedge fund places are obviously upset because they don't like the fact that a online group or community can swing a bunch of their money away from them and influence the market in such a massive capacity. So all of this has caused several applications, or specifically Robinhood, to stop all trading with any of these companies. Now, Robinhood was always set up as an app for amateurs. I've used it before. It's set up to help people that aren't all that into stocks and the market and all of that to really learn and kind of put a little bit of money somewhere and just, learn the ropes, really. But it could also be for semi-professionals too, people that really are dealing with a lot of money in different companies and whatnot. But Robinhood now, very popular trading app, is stopping people from investing in GameStop, AMC, and Nokia, because all three of those companies were companies that are effectively failing, and hedge fund companies were putting money into them or were borrowing money against them in these stocks against them, so that they in turn would make money off of it. And every one of the people on the subreddits were basically making these stock prices for those companies and others skyrocket because of the amount of money they were putting into it, basically screwing over the hedge fund companies. So I find it pretty funny, though, when you have a company called Robinhood that effectively was supposed to help small investors, is now stopping the poor from taking from the rich. Isn't that kind of weird? Am I the only one that's asking that question? It's kind of odd. I mean, it goes directly against their name. They were supposed to help the little guy out. Now all of a sudden they're saying, "Oh wait, not like that, not quite like that." They're kind of just wagging their finger at us, and it's like, wait a minute, that's not what this is about. This app was set up in a certain way for certain types of people. You can't tell us how we're supposed to or not supposed to use this application. It's free. It's a free market. We should be able to do it how we want to do it. This is also exposing trading platforms that aren't allowing free speech and trading of stocks, because there's others that are going to follow suit with this. What this is really showing is all of this corporate elitism and kind of the protection that the people with money want to have. They don't want a community of people being able to have access to the same thing. So that's why people are saying this isn't a right versus a left issue. This is simply an issue of people trying to take advantage of the things that other companies have been taking advantage of for a very long time. Effectively, all of the people that are saying, well, it's you shouldn't have been doing this. Reddit should not be doing this. It should be illegal if we're looking at what Wall Street says. They're basically telling you it's okay for the hedge fund companies to pull this stuff off, but the second that you want to, you're not allowed to have that happen. And that doesn't make any sense. This is all going to force a replacement for Robinhood, for these other applications. There has to be a replacement for these. I don't know if it's going to be Elon Musk that's going to come up with it, but there's going to be something that's going to replace these other applications if they continue to stifle the market, keep people from being able to invest in certain companies simply because they don't like it. It's also very similar, very eerily similar to social media censorship, is it not? A lot of what's happening here is where you have these smaller guys combating against people that are the elites. And social media isn't all that different from what we had to deal with Twitter, where the elites are protected and shall not be banned, and anything that you do as a smaller person, you just get stepped on in the crossfire. Somebody else can do it, like Democrats can get away with inciting violence, but the second that somebody on Twitter says something that Twitter doesn't like, you're gone. How does that work? But this is what's happening. And I also think, too, is that these aren't, like I said, this isn't a Republican-Democrat issue here. How many Democrats do you think were on that subreddit? And how many of them do you think right now are seeing this and saying, okay, like this censorship stuff has to stop? What I've said it in a previous video, but once again, once you get rid of all the conservatives, Twitter's going to ban somebody. Reddit's going to keep banning other people. It won't be conservatives. It'll be the liberals who were fighting for conservatives to get banned in the first place. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. Dr. Fauci is now telling us that 2 masks are better than 1. That's the new story right now. This whole thing is, and the issue behind the masks have completely become a joke. Just a big joke. So a quote from Dr. Fauci, which honestly his opinion is irrelevant at this point. He says, so if you have a physical covering with one layer, you put on another layer. It just makes common sense that it would likely be more effective. And that's the reason why you see people either double masking or doing a version of an N95. There's nothing common sense about this. It's just assuming. You're using some assumption that if the first mask is somewhat effective, that 2 must be. That's why I'm making kind of the joke, 2 masks are better than 1. Because that's basically what this has turned into, is a massive joke. And he's saying, basically whatever makes you feel better. It feels better to have 2 masks on, so therefore it's fine. I'm going to tell the whole world that must be so much better. This doesn't sound like a doctor's talking to anybody at this point. This doesn't sound like a doctor to me. This sounds like somebody who's just saying whatever it is that they feel on any given day of the week and just hoping that people just go along with it. Keep in mind, this was a recent report as well. Dr. Fauci made $417,000 in 2019, which basically ranks him as, what is it saying here, the highest paid doctor in the federal government, but the highest paid out of all 4 million federal employees. And this is the same guy who cost millions of Americans their jobs because it was him that was pushing the lockdowns like crazy. He makes more than a president does. I mean, granted, of course, Donald Trump didn't take his salary anyways, but as far as what Biden's getting, he's making more than presidents do. That's a lot of that doesn't make sense at all. The salary is not proportionate to what this guy is actually doing, especially when he keeps flipping and changing everything that he's saying. If you recall, this is a quote directly from him last spring. He said, "Right now, people should not be walking around. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask." Then he said, "When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet. It's not providing the perfect protection that people think it is." This was just last year. And then, of course, he flipped his position the second that there were disagreements between him and Trump. Dr. Fauci doesn't know what in the world he's talking about. He changes and flips, and how are we supposed to trust what he's saying anyway? So, I mean, he's lost all of his credibility with anybody that's paying attention to what he's saying. I mean, the Democrats would only agree with what he was saying as long as it agreed with or lined up with what the Democrats believed in. But they'll ignore everything that he said as soon as it doesn't line up with what they agree with. So what now? What's next? What is the next kind of ultimate protection that we're going to see? May I recommend the triple mask? Actually, why not the quadruple mask? I mean, to be honest with you, at this point, we just keep adding masks, and I think overall, after a while, it'll be impossible to get the virus because you won't be able to breathe. That's effectively what this is boiling down to. It's just more and more and more and more and more. Do a normal lockdown, more lockdowns. I'm surprised they haven't even done instead of 6 feet apart, 10 feet or 12 feet or 15 feet. How about 20 feet, 50 feet apart? Soon we'll just all get restraining orders and just never be around anybody ever. And that would just guarantee that nothing happens. Once again, this is the world according to Dr. Fauci, always setting himself up to contradict what he said previously and ruining his credibility every single time he opens his mouth. With that being said, just a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon where you can donate and support the channel here as well. And the show is available on Apple, on Spotify, on Anchor, wherever it is that you get your podcast. Remember, we need to invest in the creators that are helping us fight against the mainstream media. Biden is now planning to ban the word China virus or the phrase China virus. I have just one easy thing to say to him. That is not how the First Amendment works, first of all. Of course, Democrats don't believe in that, but that's not how that works. He's banning it apparently for federal workers, not the general public, because apparently he's not allowed to ban it for the general public, which is a good thing. But he shouldn't be banning it for the federal workers either. Number one, it's an absolute fact. It is from there. People oftentimes forget the Spanish flu, which was properly named, and so should this have also been named that way. This isn't helping us fight against the virus. It's all about using the virus, once again, as another reason to say you can't say these things, you can't do these things. It's all just a stupid justification of all of this. But none of this is fighting against what the reality is behind this virus. The other thing that he was basically putting into place was this executive order. And this was along the lines of 4 other executive orders that he put out, because he's actually done 36 executive orders in a week, which is basically a record. That doesn't sound like a president to me. That sounds like a dictator. But the one that is related to the whole China virus thing is this advancing in the inclusion and belonging for people of all races, national origins, and ethnicities is critical. And he's saying this in the safety and security kind of moniker, the safety and security of the American people. So the actual executive order says that that during the coronavirus disease in 2019, the pandemic, inflammatory, and xenophobic rhetoric has put Asian American and Pacific Islander persons, families, and communities and businesses at risk. So what is Biden talking about in this executive order? What he's really getting at here is that he's saying, well, because people are blaming China, that somehow is basically racist. You shouldn't be able to blame them for that. They should get off scot-free. Once again, the thing is that you can just by simply saying, hey, look, China is the reason why this virus is a thing right now, does not make you xenophobic. It doesn't make you racist. Doesn't mean that you believe that all Chinese people are responsible for that. We're talking about the country here. We're talking about the country. And he's, for some reason, just not even paying attention to actually what we're saying and what people are talking about. Listen, all businesses are struggling to a certain degree right now because of Democrat policies, locking them down, keeping them from staying open. But we have to be honest here. Saying China virus is just factually correct. You can call it what you want. You can tell people not to say something. I think he's just mad because Trump always made it clear that it is China to blame. It could have come from any other country. I don't care if it came from Africa. If you want to call it the Africa virus, call it the Africa virus. But the reason why Trump was always saying China virus was to remind people that China is not our friend, as much as Democrats want that to be the case. Hence the whole name Beijing Biden that Trump Jr. came up with last year. China's not our friend. They never saw us that way. They've cheated us out of our money. They've stolen our product ideas. They've infringed on copyrights on pretty much every product that's been ever made in the United States. And then you have this virus that we could have been and the world would have been significantly more prepared for had it not been for them covering up the information, censoring the journalists that were actually trying to speak the truth about what was going on and report it and do their job. If we had known about that way ahead of time, everybody in the world would have been more prepared. But we didn't know. And we thought, because China lied to everybody, saying it's under control, it's fine, don't look over here. But before we knew it, cases were already here, it was too late, and there was nothing we could do about it. Anyone with common sense knows that you don't have to be xenophobic to blame a country for something. It's the government that's the problem. It's the communist government. I don't know why we're even pretending to not offend them or trying not to offend them. It doesn't matter. Because I've stated this before, but had this virus started in the United States, it wouldn't have gotten to this level. Everybody would have been aware of what was going on way beforehand, and it wouldn't have been like this, where it just kind of sprung up and it was too late to really do anything. Also remember that it was Biden who called Trump xenophobic, all because of the fact that Trump even banned travel. I mean, just trying to protect the people of the United States. He was calling him xenophobic for that. That's the point that we're at right now. The fact is that it is their government's fault because they lied to the world while this virus was spreading. And nobody had a clue what was going on until it was too late. So in a bit of a different spin here, the impeachment trial is still pretty much going to happen. Trump's already not in office, folks. I have no idea why the Democrats are continuing to push this besides just pure hatred of Trump, trying to ruin everything that he's done and ruin his reputation. So Rand Paul, of all people, surprisingly, but I like him a lot more now after seeing the way that he's been fighting for the truth on this subject. But Rand Paul slams Democrats on basically their double standard.
This impeachment is nothing more than a partisan exercise designed to further divide the country. Democrats claim to want to unify the country, but impeaching a former president, a private citizen, is the antithesis of unity. Democrats brazenly appointing a pro-impeachment Democrat to preside over the trial is not fair or impartial and hardly encourages any kind of unity in our country. No, unity is the opposite of this travesty we are about to witness. If we are about to try to impeach a president, where is the Chief Justice? If the accused is no longer president, where is the constitutional power to impeach him? Private citizens don't get impeached. Impeachment is for removal from office, and the accused here has already left office. Hyper-partisan Democrats are about to drag our great country down into the gutter of rancor and vitriol, the likes of which has never been seen in our nation's history. Instead of doing the nation's work, With their new majorities in the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, Democrats are wasting the nation's time on a partisan vendetta against a man no longer in office. It's almost as if they have no ability to exist except in opposition to Donald Trump. Without him as their boogeyman, they might have to legislate and to actually convince Americans that their policy prescriptions are the right ones. Democrats are about to do something no self-respecting senator has ever stooped to. Democrats are insisting the election is actually not over, and so they insist on regurgitating the bitterness of the election. This acrimony they are about to unleash has never before been tried. Why? Because calmer heads have typically prevailed in our history and allowed public opinion to cast blame where blame is deserved. This sham of an impeachment will ostensibly ask whether the president incited the reprehensible behavior and violence of January 6th, when he said, "I know everyone here will soon march to the Capitol to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard." Peacefully and patriotically, hardly words of violence.
See, the thing is that they are out to get Trump, whether he's in or out of office. They don't care. It's ruin his life no matter what happens. People are still unable to work or run their businesses. Yet this trial is still somehow important to them? I mean, if anything, this ought to show very clearly that they could care less about whether people are able to work or run their business. They don't care about this virus. If they did, they wouldn't be wasting all of this time, money, and effort trying to impeach a president that's no longer in office. I mean, they got what they wanted. They got what they wanted. They got Biden in office. Why are we still doing this? It doesn't make sense at all. It's simply a waste of time. The other thing that Rand Paul was exposing is the hypocrisy from when Democrats have incited violence.
But what of Democrat words? What of Democrat incitement to violence? No Democrat will honestly ask whether Bernie Sanders incited the shooter that nearly killed Steve Scalise and volunteer coach. The shooter nearly pulled off a massacre. I was there because he fervently believed the false and inflammatory rhetoric spewed by Bernie and other Democrats, such as the Republican health care plan for the uninsured is that you die. As this avowed Bernie supporter shot Steve Scalise, nearly killing him, and shot one of our coaches and 2 or 3 of our staff, he screamed, "This is for health care. Ask me or anyone if that's incitement." No Democrat will ask whether Cory Booker incited violence when he called for his supporters to get up in their face of Congress people, a very visual and specific incitement. No Democrat will ask whether Maxine Waters incited violence when she literally told her supporters, and I quote, that if you see a member of the Trump administration at a restaurant, at a department store, at a gas station, or any place, you create a crowd and you push back on them. Is that not incitement? My wife and I were pushed and surrounded and screamed at by this same type of mob that Maxine likes to inspire. It's terrifying to have a swarm of people threatening to kill you, cursing at you, and literally holding you hostage until police come to your rescue. That night we were assaulted by the crowd. I wasn't sure if we'd survive even with the police protection. But no Democrat has ever considered impeaching Maxine for her violent rhetoric. In fact, Republicans, to our credit, have never once thought it legitimate to formally censor or impeach these Democrats. No Republican has sought to use the government to hold these Democrats responsible for Antifa and Black Lives Matter violence that has consumed our cities all summer, resulting in over $1 billion of destruction, looting, and property damage. Not one Republican said, "Oh, let's impeach the Democrats who are inciting this," because it would be ridiculous. Many on the Democrat side of the aisle cheered them on. Kamala Harris famously offered to pay the bill for those who were arrested. I wonder if she'll be brought up on charges of inciting violence for that now that she's vice president. Should Kamala Harris be impeached for offering to pay for violent people to get out of jail who've been burning our cities down? No. And no Republican has offered that, because we're not going down the road that Democrats have decided, this low road of impeaching people for political speech. Should Republicans impeach the Democrat mayor of Seattle, who incited and condoned violence by calling the armed takeover of part of her city a summer of love? Any Republicans try to impeach her? On June 8th, the New York Post, citing U.S. Justice Department statistics, reported that more than 700 law enforcement officers were injured during the Antifa Black Lives Matter riots. There were at least 19 murders, including 77-year-old retired police officer David Dorn. Yet Democrats insist on applying a test of incitement to a Republican that they refuse to apply to themselves. I want the Democrats to raise their hands if they have ever given a speech that says, take, back, fight for your country. Who hasn't used the words fight figuratively? And are we going to put every politician in jail? Are we going to impeach every politician who has used the words fight figuratively in a speech? Shame. Shame on these angry, unhinged partisans who are putting forth this sham impeachment, deranged by their hatred of the former president. Shame on those who seek blame and revenge and who choose to pervert a constitutional process while doing so. I want this body on record, every last person here. Is this how you think politics should be? Look, we've now got crazy partisans on the other side of the aisle trying to censor and remove two of the Republican senators for their political position. Now, look, I disagreed. I don't think Congress should overturn the Electoral College. But impeaching or censoring or expelling a member of Congress you disagree with? Is the truth so narrow that only you know the truth? We now have the media on your side saying there is only one set of facts, one set of truth, and you can only interpret it this way. Now we have 7 senators on the other side trying to expel, censor, or impugn 2 senators on this side. And I defend them, not because I defend their position. I disagreed with their position. But you can't impeach, censor, expel people you disagree with. What's this coming to?
And this just goes to show how ridiculous this entire impeachment trial is. I mean, like I said, surprisingly coming from Rand Paul, he's basically a libertarian more than he is conservative. But either way, he even realizes how dumb this is. So he had actually put forward a kind of a point of order that the impeachment was unconstitutional. President is no longer a president. How are we still able to do this? And the Senate voted on it. And it was 55-45 to basically set it aside. So they basically just ignored it. They threw it out. And surprisingly, five Republicans came out and actually voted with Democrats on this issue. And those 5 were, starting with Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney, of course, obviously Mitt Romney, Ben Sass, and Pat Toomey. By the way, all of those 5 there, they need to be primaried. I hear a lot of people that'll say they're not going to win their next election. Look, that's great, but we have to get people in these seats to replace them first. I don't want to hear they just won't get elected out of nowhere because nobody primaried these guys. If you're going to do something about it, it's time we do something about it. Put people in as a replacement to these people and make sure people know how many times these people have voted against the interests of Republicans. Mitt Romney still manages to keep winning. If people hated him that much, why has nobody primaried him? It's not like he just recently turned into basically a Democrat. He's been doing this stuff for years. And yet he's still getting elected. So we need more than talk on these issues. We need more than just people just saying they're just magically not going to win their election. That's not true. Believe it or not, most voters are not informed to how every senator votes on every single issue and cares about all of what's actually even happening with it. I don't even think most people in America are even paying attention to this impeachment like they were before. I mean, the news isn't covering it anywhere near the same as they were before. Because if anybody that's just kind of your normie person just watches this on the news, they're going to say, Wait, how are you impeaching a guy that's not even in office right now? How does that make any sense? It'll look stupid to them because it is stupid. But the media is just going to ignore it and let Democrats just play their little games and continue to do what they've always been doing. So that's the only way that things are going to change, is actually getting these people out of office. More than just making statements that could apply to almost anyone. They're not going to win an election. It matters more than that. We need to get out and literally inform people about these things, these people, the bad decisions they've made, and actually put some people in, whether that's in the new Patriot Party or just people that actually believe in something that we believe in, and put them in office instead of these 5 senators that are just lukewarm or basically Democrats. I don't see how any of these 5 can reasonably justify why they think it's okay to impeach a president that is no longer a president. That's pure derangement. A lot more than just lukewarm, but just pure insanity coming from these 5 senators. With that being said, that's all I have for you today. I thank you for watching the video. I'll be uploading separate segments of these clips as well as different news articles as they come up also on the channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one. You just watched an episode from The William Hall Show. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.